Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. We are bringing you our episode today from a country road out in the Dixie National Forest. We're going to find out about a festival. It's called the Western Freedom Festival, and it's going on in Cedar City on October 23rd. And it is a day-long conversation for people like you and me that live on the Wasatch Front to find out what's important to the heritage of Utah. So let's find out a little bit about the story before we meet some of the leaders of rural Utah to talk about the issues that affect them daily.
Freedom, liberty, federalism. What images do these stir up in your imagination? How many of you thought to yourselves, oh man, this is about to get political? Well, sometimes that's all it takes to dissuade someone from, taking that next step to learning about another person's point of view. The words we use matter, but sometimes we use them too broadly, and it creates confusion. For example, freedom and liberty are the same thing, right? Well, freedom is generally to be free from something, where liberty is the freedom to do something. So what does this all have to do with the Western Freedom Festival going on in Cedar City this October? Well, it may be the difference between whether you attend or write it off as too political.
The Western Freedom Festival is an event that we've got planned for bringing a lot of interest to the topic of the things that we believe are really important in the southern regions of the state of Utah, really everywhere. It's something that just resonates with all of us. The principles and values that surround wholesome families, the freedoms that we've been able to enjoy in this nation.
For one, it's a way of life. It's a culture. It's a heritage. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. My ancestors were ranchers in Garfield County. And there's so many people in Garfield County that don't even ranch today, that their ancestors were ranchers. They were that tough breed of people. And that's going away. That's why it's so important to remember who we are and where we come from.
It's time that people become part of bringing back the true values of our Constitution of the United States. We're not a bunch of, off-the-wall crazy type commissioners. We're just passionate people that want to put good public, practical uses of our public lands back into the hands of the true people of our country.
Discussing the current state of our country has become divisive, emotional, and frustrating. The polite thing to do would be to not say anything at all.
People have become so complacent in their day-to-day lives, they don't pay attention. We want to put the word out that this is our country, and it's time that we stand together, united, and take back the principles in which it was founded on.
The event focuses on honoring the Western culture, heritage, and family values that mean so much to so many people. The day will be filled with learning opportunities presented by speakers from across the country, hitting on constitutional law, federalism, and exploring why access to public lands is such a key feature of life here in the West. A live concert by country western star Daryl Worley will culminate the event. The Western Freedom Festival leads right into Cedar City's signature fall event, the Cedar Livestock and Heritage Festival, going on that same weekend.
This is just a great opportunity for us to come together and celebrate our country, our state, the counties and cities that we live in, work with each other and collaborate so that we can protect them. This is an important thing. This isn't necessarily that we're trying to throw rocks at anybody. We're trying to preserve and protect the freedoms and heritage that is so valuable for all of us.
If you feel strongly that you're being locked out of public land and your rights are being taken away from you, and you believe that our way of life is something to preserve and fight for, show up on October 23rd, because that's what this is about.
So is this event political? Well, it depends on how broadly you apply the definition, but you are free to decide. Next, Chad Booth will talk to the county commissioners behind putting this event together about its purpose. For the county seat, I'm Derek Dowsett.
Gentlemen, thank you for letting us join your conversation today.
We appreciate you coming down, Chad, because it's very important to us. Thank you.
We have Commissioner Darren Bushman from Paiute County. We have Alan Gardner, who is from Washington County, Commissioner Doug Heaton from Kane County, Commissioner Tallboy Mark Whitney from Beaver County, and Commissioner Leland Pollock from Garfield County. How did somehow or another it become political? What happened? Because all of a sudden people are saying this is a political event, and my understanding is that it's just about our heritage.
It isn't political. We are simply trying to celebrate what we've always done. It becomes political when someone is threatened by what we've always done. Our heritage is a heritage of independence, of liberty, of principles and values. Principles and values aren't very popular anymore. And for those who don't like principles and values, they see us as a threat. So for them, it is political, I suppose. For us, it's just life as usual.
Anybody else wants to make this political, it's their fault. You know, this is about a group of guys that want to get together and show people, look, we're tired of the roads being closed. We're tired of the rancher getting kicked off the range. We're tired of our forests burning. And we're tired of losing our heritage, as he mentioned. And that's what this is all about.
None of you, even though you're all in elected positions, are career politicians. As a matter of fact, technically, each one of you is a part-time commissioner. Isn't that not right?
Well, we're considered part-time. We're very much full-time, Chad.
It's a part-time job that's 60 hours a week.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're trying to say?
That's about what it amounts to, yeah.
You know, a few years ago, I had the privilege and honor of finally coming in tune with great guys like this. They're not politicians. None of us are politicians. We're a group of people that have passion for doing what's right for our people, for our country. As we've said about this festival, it's custom, culture, heritage, and patriotism. And that's what we're about. We're not about politics. We're about what's doing right for our country.
You know, like Mark says, this is a group of individuals that are committed to their communities. They're committed to their counties. They're committed to their lifestyles and the history, and they care about the future of those communities. That's why we do it. We don't do it for the money by any means, Chad.
If we think we're politicians, the people will come in and humble you real quick. We're around the people, up close and personal, believe me, every day.
Sometimes you wonder if you want to go back to your hangout spot or not, because there'll be somebody there with a question, or, you know, not that we're not anxious to deal with the issues, but sometimes you need a break.
Well, let's kind of get into some of those issues, okay? I know that one thing that's on the minds of everybody is the health of the forests.
This forest up here, particularly back in 1990, there were two valleys, Rainbow Valley and Sydney Valley, that they found some beetles. And so the forest went in with a plan to cut the trees. They went through their NEPA process. Took them a year to get through there. And then when they got done, the Friends of Dixie and a couple other environmental groups filed a lawsuit against them because they wanted it to be natural. And so the Forest Service won the lawsuit, but it was 3 years later. And by that time, the beetle was out ahead of them. And you can see what the mountain looks like now. We've not been able to get in and really manage like it needs to be managed.
This is not a matter of if, but when the catastrophic fires are going to happen, like been going on in the Northwest right now. You've seen the great devastation of what's happened up there. Human lives being lost because they're just not managing forests to be healthy, and they need to do it.
You know, Chad, this is a real problem, and you look at a county like Paiute. We have 727 square miles in Paiute. Our own state forester says 527 square miles of that is extreme fire risk. You look at the situation that we have in Paiute County with our economy. We have grazing and we have tourism. If you were to see the type of fires that they've seen in Idaho and Montana, we're literally one spark away from Paiute County being a ghost county. Those economies vaporize with one forest fire.
The Dixie says they're doing treatments up here on the forest now, and they're trying to clear out some of this stuff.
But it's so far ahead of them, they're never going to get it. And the environmentalists are still out there filing lawsuits.
This is a case of not understanding the forest economy. You know, we were all taught that, you know, we have to be these preservationists, and we got to stop logging, we got to stop doing all these other things, but it's simply a matter of not understanding what the forest dynamic is. This area will only sustain about 40 trees an acre. Every tree, you have to understand that every tree sucks up 15 to 50 gallons of water every day. And there simply isn't enough water to sustain the 600 or 700 trees per acre that we get when we don't weed this garden. It's a simple matter of what we thought was the solution has become the problem.
There's several problems with the conifer. One of it is, you know, you get up here in the wintertime and the snow falls. Well, a lot of that snow hangs up in those trees, and it evaporates from the trees before the water ever gets to the ground. If you've got the quakies up here like should be here, why is happening now in the fall, why those leaves are falling, so all the snow comes down, we get all the moisture.
We didn't have this problem when we had sawmills, and until these tree huggers come in and shut all of this down, we had viable economies in counties like Paiute, Garfield, all these rural areas.
But it goes a lot further than the viable economy. It goes to the healthy forest.
Absolutely.
We had healthy forests because we weeded this garden instead of creating a museum. We weeded the garden, and in that process, then you can keep a forest young and vibrant forever.
You said something very interesting there, Doug, that I kind of want to follow on, because you mentioned this earlier, that people on the Wasatch Front see southern Utah as a museum for them to come visit on the weekends. What kind of problems does that create for you guys down here?
Well, in my county, for example, we don't have an economy that sustains young people to stay in the county. We graduate 30 students a year from Paiute High School, and 29 of them have to move 300-400 miles away, Chad. The $8, $9 an hour jobs that are created with tourism, and don't get me wrong, we love every dollar we get from tourism, that does not sustain a family in our county. And so what you have is a county like mine who has the highest median age in the state. You know the old saying, if you don't grow, you die? Well, it's obvious my county's dying. We're a ghost county in the making, and young families are not staying and locating in Paiute County because of there's no economy left. If we were Salt Lake County or Weber County or Utah County, you know, one of our urban areas, and 1 in 3 people in the county couldn't put food on the table, think about what kind of political nightmare we have.
That would be Detroit, wouldn't it?
That very well may be Detroit, but in this case, it's South Central Utah.
It's hit home.
Another thing, those $8, $9 an hour jobs, a lot of those are just seasonal jobs too. They don't even go all year long.
Yeah, we're talking about a 110-day season. You know, we have people who live in urban areas that think that, you know, we should be great with a tourism economy, but you're only talking 110 days a year, and I don't know many people that can make a living on 110 days a year.
We don't have anybody here from that region, but you know, the Ashley up in the northeast part of the state, above Uintah County, which used to be a pretty vibrant logging community, at one point they were saying, not too long ago as they did their forest plan revision, that the best use for the Ashley is no longer logging, it's recreation. And then they followed it with their transportation plan, and they took more than half the roads out in their transportation plan. What's going on? That doesn't make much sense to me.
I was part of I'm one of the founding members of the American Lands Council and the transfer of public lands. Those who opposed the transfer of public lands branded us as being the ones who wanted to close access. That is exactly opposite. Our whole agenda was and is to provide better access for everybody who wants to use the forest.
These closed roads you're talking about, there was actually a plan that went into place in 2009 that on paper closed 75% of the roads on the Dixie, which is catastrophic. You lose your access. And I'll give you an example of why that's bad. One of my constituents in Panguitch come into the Chevron station just yesterday and said, I was out hunting. We were on a trail that had been open. I'm retired. I physically cannot go. We turned around when we seen the closed sign and come back, but I feel like I've been discriminated against. There are many people in this state that are being discriminated against because they cannot get access and see these wonderful forests.
You know, there's a reason why we call them multiple use lands. That means lands that are available for everyone. Everyone needs to be able to have access to this land, from the people that are handicapped or crippled to those, if they want to be wilderness seekers. Topography dictates that itself. If it's wilderness, it's got the wilderness characteristics. Let those folks go in there. But we also got to have those roads open, as he said, not only to manage the forest, but for equal access to everybody to these forest lands.
We are on ABC4, and their avatar is a 35-year-old mom that lives in West Jordan. She's got 3.2 kids in junior high through grade school. Okay, why do I care about any of this?
Well, let's reverse the tables, Chad. Let's just say that you're in Salt Lake County and you're raising those children up. You're investing your tax dollars in building an asset for your community. And guess what? You have to ship your kids off 300 to 400 miles for them to sustain themselves, to be able to make a living. That's what you'd be talking about. It's the same scenario. You know, we say the only thing we export from Paiute County is milk and children, and that's pretty much the way it is. And you know, people don't think about that. They forget that there are people down here in the museum trying to make a living and trying to deal with these issues on a day-to-day basis, and trying to deal with regulatory issues and overreach and whatever you want to call it. Call it politics, but to us it's life, Chad. It's what we deal with every day.
No politics in it at all. This is not about politics. It's livelihoods.
If we do what you say we should do, if we should actively log and bring it down to 60 or 40 trees per acre, if we graze and we start grazing the meadows and we move cattle across here, that we are ruining the recreational opportunity, we are ruining the landscape, and we are devastating our natural resources, because that's the narrative that is going on the Wasatch Front. And people, I mean, I know what you guys are doing, but my kids even think that.
You can, well, that's what we've been taught, isn't it? You can teach that and tell it and convince the city dweller, because they don't live close enough to the forest. When they come back to the forest, they don't see the difference in what was there. But the forest is a very dynamic thing. These forests, the western forests, produce 16 billion board feet, if you were to measure it in lumber, worth of timber every year. At the height of our industry in about 1985, we were harvesting about 12 of that 16 billion, which means we still had 4 billion board feet worth of excess growth. We're down to less than 2 now, which means that there's about 15 billion board feet of wood growing every single year. So what happens to all that wood? I mean,
it gets diseased,
it just gets
more. It's pretty obvious.
And more
9.5 million acres of it burned this year.
That's
and it
right.
all went up in smoke.
It's either boards or it's fuel, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, it is absolutely predictable what was happening in Washington and Oregon and California. We could have, in fact, we did. We've been saying for years, this is what's going to happen, and now it's happening, and the fires are becoming more and more catastrophic, and they will continue to do so until the forest is gone.
Okay. But everybody in Salt Lake knows that's climate change. That's what's made these trees sick, is climate change.
Actually, it's the fact that we now have 500 trees per acre where we used to have 50. That's what's causing it. It's not climate change. What's causing you know, if you take that much water and suck it up and disperse it off into the atmosphere in the tree growth process, what happens to your water tables? If we were to manage these forests the way they're designed to be managed, we could keep them young and vibrant forever. It'd be the perfect environment for the wildlife. It's a perfect recreation area because you can get through and you can go places and do stuff. And in the process, we develop some family-sustaining jobs. So we have a healthy environment. We have really good population for the animals. We have economic stability. There are no losers here. You know, there's one other thing that I didn't mention. When you've got 500 trees per acre, you don't get any more big trees. You just don't get them. They all die small because they grow and they compete until they can't compete anymore, and then the beetle gets them and then they burn.
If it's climate change, how come it isn't happening in Canada? How come it isn't happening where states manage their forests? How come it isn't happening all of those other places? Climate change is supposed to be a global event, right? It's not happening in Canada because they are actively managing their forests, and we're not doing it.
You know, climate changes every day. There's nobody contests that fact. But is it man-caused, and it's mismanagement as the issue that we have here.
At least as far as the forests are bringing. We'll leave the climate change debate for another day. But
And you mentioned something about grazing, though, that I wanted to follow up on. You know, as this grass grows, why it burns or it gets eaten off. And there was a great example just coming up I-15 just today. So they came along the road while there had been a fire right along the road, and it burned a stretch for probably 100 yards or more. And it burned right down along there, and there was just a straight black line on the edge of the fire where it had quit. And I looked, took me just a second, and I thought, well, naturally, there's a fence right there. Exactly. The other side of this fence has been grazed, and so there's not all this dead, decadent forage up there that's going to burn.
That's really the fascinating thing, when a barbed wire fence will stop a fire.
You know, and it goes back to the fact, you go back in history, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, we didn't have catastrophic wildfires like this. There was management, there was timber harvesting. From 1940 to 2012, the AUMs, or the amount of cattle that was on these national forests grazing, has been reduced by 70 to 75%. Now look, because it's a tinderbox. It's a system that has to have balance.
But Mark, some people would argue that that is a coincidence, and they would point to the fact that CO2 levels have gone up, and that we've created this near catastrophic thing that's melting all the glaciers.
If you're really interested in controlling CO2, why would you allow a forest fire? Exactly. I mean, oh my goodness. Could you imagine how much CO2? There are people who have put measurements on it. It's greater than all of our industrial processes combined.
Absolutely. And that's science that cannot be argued with.
But if I made that statement in Salt Lake, somebody would walk up to me and say, show me where.
Oh, go to the internet. The internet is the truth.
You know, here we are talking about the Wasatch Front and trying to convince other people of everything that's going on in these rural areas. That is the whole problem. They cannot manage these lands from Washington, D.C.
Exactly right.
They do not have a clue what goes on in Washington, D.C. in rural America.
But it's even bigger than that, because when they try and manage them, they get litigated. Yeah. They are managing litigation,
which makes it an impossible situation.
So let me go back to because you're on ALC, and we've done several shows on the transfer of public lands. Would the litigation go away if those lands were transferred to state control?
Litigation is primarily driven by a law called EJA. It's the Equal Access to Justice Act, which allows the environmental community, or anybody for that matter, to sue the federal government. If they win even 1 point of a 40-point lawsuit, they're entitled to to be reimbursed for all of their costs. Now, what we find them doing, and this is just what they do. They go in, they have these attorneys that believe in their cause, they work pro bono, and or for a little bit. But when they bill it to the federal government to get reimbursed, they bill it out at $500 an hour or more, and so it's become an industry. That law does not apply to state-owned land. It only applies to federal.
What we stand for as rural commissioners in our values, our cultures, our customs, and our patriotism is the demise of these NGOs or special interest groups and their attorneys. Because yes, the transfer of public lands brings those to the state. Therefore, EJA goes away because there are no longer federal laws that apply, and we can finally manage things. And it's not just about forests. I mean, you go out to the BLM lands, anything throughout America.
Well,
it's
that would be a
about
horse
common
thing
sense.
for you, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you have the horse situation in the west of part of Utah, and in the west as a whole. I mean, the BLM's own numbers estimate them to be 50,000. There's only supposed to be 26,000 wild horses on the range. And I'm not against the horses, most people aren't, but our numbers are closer to 70 to 75,000. And they're just literally destroying themselves. They're destroying the water sources, they're destroying the ranges, and when you have droughts like this, it's not good.
Again, Mark, though, I go back to that Wasatch Front argument. They'll say, no, if the cattle grazers were gone, the horses would be fine.
They wouldn't be fine.
But let me put this. Where does beef come from? Can you imagine buying a piece of hamburger or a good beef steak if there was not these public lands to graze those cattle on, and they was always in feedlots? There you go. You think of that. You'd be talking $25, $30 a pound beef.
And all of these things that we're talking about, all of these infringements that we're talking about are being done on the backs of these rural people. That's why they have the lowest median incomes. That's why they're moving away. And you know, you're reading the newspaper today. Now we're trying to legalize importing beef from Africa. Okay? So here we are, we have all the resource in the world, but we've put rural America out of work. It doesn't make any sense, Chad.
You know, going back to those horses for just a minute, we had Neil Cornsey, who's the director of BLM, with us here a week ago for some meetings with the Utah Association of Counties. And this was an item discussed with him. You know, we talked about all the thousands that are overpopulation out on the range, but they've got 50,000 head of these horses that they've got in corrals, just warehousing them because they don't have anything to do with them. They can't do anything else with them. And that's costing them, what do you say, $50,000 for a horse for the lifetime of that horse that they maintain it. You put that $50,000 that's costing them in the 50,000 horses, that's $2.5 billion that they're going to have invested in that bunch of horses they've got right now.
And the populations keep rising.
And the populations keep rising.
Any last thoughts, gentlemen?
Well, I'd like a parting thought. I'd just like to make sure that everybody understands this is not about anyone picking on anybody. We're not picking on the Wasatch Front. We're just trying to drive home a point, and that we are truly celebrating a great event in what we believe in rural America, and that is what our culture, customs, and values are about.
Well, I didn't feel picked on, Mark, and I'm from the Wasatch Front, so
I think, you know, heritage is what we're talking about, and that's been our heritage, is to grow up on these lands, taking care of them. We realize the importance, because if we don't take care of them and they mismanage, well, they don't provide livelihoods for us. So, you know, it's been,
and
my family's been down here since 1861
for the rest of us.
Exactly.
Okay, gentlemen, I want to thank you for your time today. I hope this has helped spread some light to you. If you really want to understand your heritage, that the pioneer heritage that made this state, grab your families, come down to the Western Freedom Festival, October 23rd. Stay for the Livestock and Heritage Festival. It's in Cedar City. You can get links from the county seat website to find out how to make arrangements to come down. Let's fill that auditorium and bring your children and learn a little bit about the heritage and the patriotism and the culture that all of us identify with as Utahns. Thank you for joining us this week on the County Seat. Thank you for being a part of the discussion. Thank you at home for allowing us into your homes each week. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Get involved, be part of the solutions that make our life better. We are going to leave you with some iconic pictures of our heritage in the West, and we'll see you next week on the County Seat. If you like this video, then we invite you to subscribe to our channel, The County Seat. You can do that here. And we invite you to share with your friends. We also invite you to get all the latest up-to-date information by following us on our social media channels. And if all else fails, make sure that you watch The County Seat Sunday morning at 8:30 right here on ABC4 Utah.